Hey there, everybody, and welcome back to episode 35 of Kingdom Culture, where we talk about real life struggles, the pursuit of God in our process, overcoming our past, and becoming the sons and daughters God created us to be. I'm your host, Kara, and if you're on YouTube and you're watching, you can see my co host, Max, snoozing on the couch. He definitely does not pull his weight around here. So, this episode is going to be a spin-off of sorts from last week's episode. So if you didn't watch that, I encourage you to go check it out. It's called Stepping into a New Season. And so when we step into a new season, often that season is accompanied with all kinds of things that get stirred up from the past. Recently, the Lord, in my quiet time, said the word dredge to me. And I was like, okay, I kind of know what that is. I mean, I know functionally what it is, but I'm a word nerd and I love to go look up what words actually mean and the different uses. I've talked about this on the podcast before. And so dredge is actually where it stirs up things from the bottom and it resets the ecosystem oftentimes. And so I think that's very interesting as we talked about the new season last week. And tonight, what we're going to be talking about is taming your triggers, because in a new season, you're going to be triggered. Things are going to come up. Things that you thought were no longer a problem are going to come up. You're going to feel things. You're going to think things. You might even find yourself behaving in ways that are of an old season, of a past season. And maybe if you have been on your own for a while, or you've been doing a certain job for a while, or you've been in a certain environment for a while, kind of doing your own thing. We touched on this last week too. It's very easy for you to get into your own rhythm, but when you introduce new things into your life, interactions stir things up. It dredges things. It dredges that canal of emotion, of thoughts, of experience, of, all the things that are inside of us that often don't come up unless we're triggered. So I want to talk about that in this episode of how to tame your triggers. Some insight that the Lord actually gave me this weekend. I was on a hike and I've had a couple conversations with people lately about just different stuff. And so I want to share, again, this kind of comes from a real life experience. I always like to bring my real life experience because I feel like that at least allows it to be relatable because I'm experiencing it or have experienced it myself. And so I'm not just talking about something from like a high overhead view perspective. I'm actually talking about it from being in the trenches. And so I want to explore this and kind of explain what I've learned, the insight that I've been given, and just kind of, what the Lord is showing me in as I step into a new season and some of the things that have come up for me. And so first of all, again, a new season, whether it's a relationship or an opportunity or a job or, a new city or just a new environment or a new hobby or whatever it is, if you are being called to step into something new and you are being obedient to that call, just expect there to be challenges. Expect for your triggers to come up because first of all, everybody has triggers. None of us are without them. None of us are above them. None of us have arrived or are enlightened to the level of being completely free of being triggered. And if you know someone or you are someone who has that level of just self-assuredness and you have that together, please, I want to meet you and I want to interview you and I want to talk to you for hours because I don't believe you exist. So I think that the more important thing is not to feel ashamed or bad about the things that we experience, but just to use them as indicators, kind of like our emotions are indicators. Our emotions are not bad and they're not even good. They're just indicators. And so I want to make sure that we're exploring all of these different ideas around what a trigger is and how to work through those kinds of things in newness, okay? So let's just dive on in. We're going to dive down into the deep end. I just sounded so Southern just now, you guys. That's really funny. Okay, so first of all, the first thing to really consider is you must know your own triggers. You got to know them. You can't just walk around just being completely unaware of yourself and expect the world to revolve around you. There's so much of that going on in our culture right now where people just think that the world literally revolves around them, their feelings, their thoughts, their emotions, and that people should just cater to that. No, ma'am. No, sir. That is not how good relationship, healthy relationship, effective relationship, and again, everything is relationship. We are created for relationship. First of all, with God, and then with ourselves and then one another. So it doesn't matter if it's a friendship, a personal relationship, a professional relationship, a romantic relationship. It doesn't matter. Everything is relational. Okay, so let's just keep in mind that that ties to every facet of our lives, even if it's a relationship with ourselves. Okay, so we can even trigger ourselves. I know I've triggered myself in the last couple months. So these are all things, again, that I've kind of gone through myself. So know what your triggers are. And we should be self-aware enough as adults. We've been through enough stuff, I think most of us. And if you're younger and you're just kind of coming into some understanding about self-awareness and things like that, bravo to you. Kudos to you. Take this as an opportunity to really dive in and dig into this, because you will be way ahead of the game when you're my age, you know what I mean? And you're just kind of figuring things out when you're older like me. I didn't start really studying myself until I was probably in my mid 30s. And so, that's been a couple years now, 10 years, but it's we are all on a journey. We're all on a journey of self-discovery, but really it's our self-discovery to find ourselves back in the presence of God. And we're actually looking for our original identity in Jesus Christ. And so I think that it's super duper important that we understand what triggers us, and that we can be open and honest, first of all, vulnerable with ourselves, because if we can't even accept them as being true, or we don't even identify them and understand what they are, then there is no way, friend, that we are going to be able to explain or express that to someone that we care about, or someone that we're building a friendship with, or that we're building a relationship with, or that we're building a partnership with. There's just no way we're going to be able to do that. But if we can come to the table fully in vulnerability with who we are and being okay and in acceptance of who we are, then that is going to be a huge game changer for how we communicate with each other and how we actually give grace and mercy and compassion to ourselves, understanding to ourselves. And the more that we can do that for ourselves, the more we're going to be able to do that for other people. The more compassion and grace and mercy and understanding and kindness that we're going to be able to bestow to other people, because we're all just human beings out here trying to make it work, right? We're all just trying to live this thing called life. And if you're a believer in Jesus Christ, we're out here trying to serve the Lord and focus on what he's called us to do. And so we have to be so aware of what bothers us, what triggers us, and then know how you react. Know how you react to those things, because if you just go out blindly into the world and, again, you think that the world revolves around you and that people are supposed to read your mind and just deal with your outbursts or deal with your dysfunction, that's not fair to people that you supposedly care about. We are all adults. We are grown, whether you are 18 years old or 67 years old or 67 plus. We are all adults. We are all responsible for ourselves. Sure, I'm sure so many of us have suffered traumatic experiences during childhood, maybe even during our young adulthood, maybe even during our adulthood. But the fact of the matter is, like we talked about last week, is it happening right now? And the thing is that we are responsible for ourselves. We are responsible for our emotions and our emotional management. We are responsible for being the CEO of our own life and taking charge of our triggers and us managing our own triggers, because those buttons are going to be pushed. I read a life-changing book back in 2016. I think I might have shared this a little bit long time ago on another episode. It's called The DNA of Relationships, and it was a book that actually led me to Jesus. Maybe I'll give my testimony sometime. I'm not sure I've ever actually shared that before, but it led me to know Jesus. And I'd had that book for about 7 years, never cracked it open one time. And a situation had occurred in my life. I was looking for truth, and I found the Lord through that book. And so it talked about managing your emotions and how to communicate with a partner and how to be in a better relationship with people and how to manage your own triggers, because they call them buttons. Your buttons will be pushed. People will inadvertently, intentionally, unintentionally, on accident, maybe on purpose. It doesn't really matter. It can be any amalgamation of different things, right? But your buttons are your responsibility to manage. You can't abdicate that responsibility to someone else. You can't expect someone else to know all your buttons and just tiptoe around them either, because we all have our own stuff. Remember, back at the top of the episode, everyone has triggers. So oftentimes what happens is when you are triggered, in this book is how it's explained, when you are triggered, your dysfunction reacts instead of responds, and then you inadvertently will react into a dysfunctional mannerism or mechanism that will then trigger the other person. And then you get into what the book calls a fear dance. And it really takes one person to change that dance. It takes one person to stop dancing to make the dance quit, right? And so knowing how you react in situations, knowing how you react in certain areas of your heart, that when those things come up for you, being able to identify those reactions is so key, because then you can start to question, are those reactions really what you want to do? You get to decide how you want to handle things going forward. Maybe it's something you've always done. Maybe it's a reaction that you've always done as long as you can remember, and it's not working out for you. It's not creating the outcomes that you desire. It's not creating the healthy relationships that you seek. It's not helping to bring people closer to you. Instead, it's repelling the people that you want close to you away from you. So you have to be aware of what your responses are and then determine if that is actually what you want. Now, maybe on the other side of that response is actually a response and not a reaction. Maybe you've worked through the reactionary period of that trigger trauma response, and now you've worked through it enough where you actually are responding. So you might say, yeah, actually, okay, I feel pretty good about that. I feel like it's healthy and I've grown. Maybe it's not perfect, but I'm on the right track. That's awesome. That's great. This is not an exercise in shaming you or shaming myself. It's really an exercise in being aware and having self-discernment, having that awareness of self to be able to say, this is an area I can improve on, because it's not bringing goodness to my life. It's only bringing sadness or pain or, detriment to my life. And I'm wanting to cultivate a life of joy and peace and celebration. And not that everything's going to be perfect all the time, but we can look for the good in all things, even if they suck sometimes. So it's very important for you to decide on what it is that you want to handle a different way, and then figure out a way to actually do that. Decide what that new response is. And the difference between a reaction and a response is a reaction is not proactive. So a reaction is your default, right? You're just gonna do whatever you're doing. There's no thought to that. There's no consideration to that. It's just, you just fall into that rut. But a response is proactive. Okay, a response takes time to think about, let's think about what I don't want to have happen, what I don't want to do, how I don't want to treat people in my life, how I don't want to treat myself, the thoughts that I don't want to have anymore, the feelings that I don't want to carry around anymore. How can I change that within myself so that what I say out of my mouth is actually what's in my heart? How can I reframe my heart? How can I reframe my mind to not get into that default where I'm abdicating control of self to a default response or reaction, but where can I then be more cognizant and proactive and take charge of my mind and my emotions and think of ways, this certain situation really triggers me, and I notice myself acting this way, and it makes me feel very bad about myself, and then I notice that I act in these other behaviors that's kind of a sabotage sort of mindset. And then it gets down into this rabbit hole of just dysfunction. And I don't really like that anymore. Maybe instead of doing that, I could respond a different way. Maybe instead of doing X, Y, or Z, I could try A, B, or C. And then the next time that trigger comes up, because you know it's going to come up, you can practice that A, B, or C choice instead of falling back to the X, Y, and Z. So it's something that you have to be, again, aware of, and you have to be willing and open to be vulnerable and to practice it. And you're not going to get it perfect all the time. You might not get it perfect for the next 10 times, but at least you're working towards that. And if you can share with the people in your life, like where you're struggling and what you're trying to work on, then when those triggers do come up, if you do react in a way that you would rather not, then at least that could be an avenue to have a discussion about, hey, I didn't handle that well. I'm really trying to work on this. I'm sorry I didn't handle it well. Apologize to yourself, apologize to the people that are, you're hurting in your life by your negative responses, and just continue to work forward and towards that goal. Continue to move forward and work towards that goal is what I'm trying to say. So you don't have to make it where it's just this rigorous, regimented response. However, you do want to redefine that original default response, and you want to replace it with a new response. But the new response is going to take time. It's going to take a process. It's going to take practicing it over and over until you master it and actually replace that old with the new. And so you have to practice it. You have to walk it out. And that's a really important thing. And so how you choose to practice that can look however you want it to look. For me, I am a verbal processor to a point. I also am, more introspective at times too. I'm more of those little ambiverts. And so I like to process on my own, but I also like to share once I kind of have things figured out. But on some levels, I do like to kind of work things through and figure out, like, if I can have some feedback from other people as I'm doing that as a sounding board to help me kind of figure things out. So it just kind of depends on the situation. So you can take it however you want. But let's say you're practicing something. Maybe you have a significant other, you have a boss, or you have a friend who certain things are really triggering you in that relationship. And so maybe the thing to do is to have a conversation and say, hey, listen, I just want to let you know, when this and this happens, it makes me feel this way. Never put the blame on the other person either, because they're your buttons. They're not that other person's buttons. It's your responsibility. It's your responsibility to manage them. And it's also your responsibility to express, so that the people that love you and care about you and are in a relationship with you, they can learn how to maybe reframe certain things to help you. Because if you don't share with people what's going on inside you, they have their own stuff going on. People have their own stuff going on, and a lot of times, like, what their response is to you has really nothing to do with you. So you have to be cognizant of that. Like, people have their own stuff going on. They're not so much worried about what's going on in your brain. They can't tell anyways. No one can know what you're thinking or feeling outside of yourself. And if you don't share that with other people, then you're going to have these unrealistic expectations for other people to be able to solve your problems, to know what you're thinking, know how you're feeling, and then serve those things in the way that you need them to. But they're never going to know that. You are setting yourself up for a massive, grave disaster. That is not going to be a successful approach at all, ever. So you have to make sure that you are understanding who you are, what you're about, what triggers you, and then express those things to the people in your life so that you can understand, how them understand how to help you to be better. Now, on the other side, there might be things that trigger you that doesn't need a conversation. You just need to take charge of that stuff and put down a boundary. And you need to take care of it. You need to figure it out, because it might not be about the other person at all. That person might just be that person. And that person, if you love that person, that's just how they are, then you need to accept that that's how that person is and just have a boundary. So I'm going to give you an example. Okay. This is something that the Lord kind of showed me. And so with me personally, right? I don't like to feel like someone's trying to control me. I just don't. I need my freedom. I need my space. Okay. And so if I feel like someone is trying to control me, then now we're talking about from a place of dysfunction. Okay. Not a place of cognizant self-awareness. We're going to discuss the dysfunction first so that we can have the contrast, because I love me some contrast and juxtaposition. Okay. So dysfunction. If I'm feeling like someone's trying to control me, okay, it could be my time. It could be, really probably my time is the biggest one, but it could be my time. It could be someone trying to just control me. And so however, okay, if I'm feeling like someone's trying to control me, If I'm in my dysfunction and I am triggered, what I will do if I don't face it, okay, if I don't stand up for myself and I don't face it, then I'm going to fall into my dysfunction, which is going to make me feel very bad because I'm going to try to figure out a way to gain that control back in some form or fashion. And typically what that would look like is I'm going to then try to reach out and control another kind of situation that's in my life so that I can feel safe again, so I can feel good again, so I can feel like no one's controlling me, I'm actually in control. Do you see how messed up that is? And that does not leave me or probably anybody else feeling very good because, again, that fear dance, right? And so if I'm feeling triggered and then I step into dysfunction, I try to gain control by doing something else, by doing the exact same thing that I hate being done to me, to somebody else, that's going to trigger that other person. And do you see how the breakdown of relationship can start to occur? And it's going to make people not want to be in relationship with you. Now, having a boundary though, okay? In this situation, sometimes the boundary is just saying no, which can be very hard. It can be just saying no. And in that instance, okay, if you're triggered, but you stand your ground and you realize, okay, I'm feeling triggered, and instead of stepping into dysfunction to try to control it, the only thing I can control is myself. I can only control me. I can only control what I'm thinking, and I can only control what I'm feeling by managing my emotions, stepping into reality, and understanding that I have a choice in this situation, I have a voice in this situation, and I can lay down a boundary. And the people in my life who really love me and who are really for me and who are really alongside me, they're going to respect my boundary. And guess what? If they don't, okay, then you can determine later if that person is really someone who has a place in your life, who has earned and deserves a place in your life, because we should not be surrounding ourselves with people who cannot respect our boundaries. But we have to respect our boundaries first, friends. We have to be able to uphold the standards that we set out ourselves if we ever expect anybody else in our life to respect those same boundaries or to uphold our standards, because we cannot be hypocrites. We cannot say, this is my boundary, and then we don't even uphold it ourselves, but yet expect other people to do it. That is a bad, bad recipe. Do not try that recipe. You will hate it, okay? And so will everybody else. But in the situation of, if someone in this hypothetical situation, if someone is trying to control me, and I'm like, man, I'm feeling kind of triggered. I'm feeling this person's kind of trying to control me in whatever degree or however, I can just say no. I can put a boundary down and not receive that from that person. And then I'm responding from my identity. I'm responding from knowing who I am. I'm not a pushover. I can't let other people control me. I'm in control of myself. I don't want to control anybody else. I don't want anybody to control me. I need to be in control of me. And so stepping into my identity instead of dysfunction, that allows me to stay grounded in that moment and know what is good for me and what is healthy for me and what is respectful for the situation. The Lord gave me this insight a couple years ago. It's like, what's really right for me is right for everybody else. Now that could be coined and termed and twisted a whole bunch of different ways. But let me break down what that actually means, what that means from the Lord to my heart. When it is loving, when it is kind, when it is honest, when it is truth in love, when it honors God, then it's right for us individually. And if it's right for us individually and it meets all of that criteria that I just mentioned, then it's actually good for everybody else. Because at the end of the day, we're called to honor the Lord and to love others. And so if we're doing that, even if someone doesn't agree or they don't like it or it bristles against what they want, or their own expectation, they can take that up with the Lord. But if you know that you're doing the right thing and you know you're doing it from a place of being like, I need to honor myself and I need to, in this place, show that person that I love them by loving myself, by honoring myself. Because if you do something, let's just use this back in dysfunction. If you do something, right? If you allow someone to control you, let's just say your time, all right? If you allow someone to control you, then you're going to go into this in a huge victim mentality. You're going to feel so woe is me, so pitiful and sorry for yourself. You're going to be resentful. You're not going to have a decent time. It's going to come through. You're going to be miserable. And that's probably going to start a whole other issue. You don't want that. It's easier just to say no and avoid the entire thing, because that's actually the loving thing to do. That's actually the kind thing to do. That's actually the honest thing to do. And doing those things, knowing that if you did the opposite of that, that you're going to feel this bitterness and this contention and this like anger or just this bad feeling against that other person. We're not supposed to have that against our brothers and sisters in Christ. So we're supposed to live peaceably with each other. So again, if it honors God and it's the right thing for you by honoring God, then it's good for everybody else. So make sure that when you respond and not react, that you are responding from a place of identity, knowing who you are in Christ, and that you have that ability and that control of your faculties to make that good decision, not only for you, but for other people who are involved too. And so then you can just move on with your day. There's no strife, there's no contention, there's no rumination, or there's no like thinking it over and over in your mind or wishing what you could have said, or that all goes away. That all that anxiety, all that resentment, all that whatever bitterness, that all goes away. And you're able to just move on with your life and enjoy what's next. You know what I mean? And like not get caught up in that, just cycle of viciousness within yourself that's going to come out. It's going to come out. It's going to come out. So you don't want to do that, because that keeps you in dysfunction. It keeps you in that place of brokenness. When we're called higher, baby, we are called to soar like eagles. Like we are called to go higher with the Lord, deeper with the Lord. We are not called to stay in this old place. He's bringing us out of Egypt, and we can wander around in the wilderness for 40 years if you want to, but it's really a very short trek to the promised land. And so it's up to you really of how long you want to stay in this middle ground transitional place of getting it together and figuring it out, because the Lord is more than willing to help you. He's showing us all the way, right? And so we have to step into that and take control of our own actions and behaviors and be responsible for those things, because if we don't do that, then we abdicate and we put it on someone else, and then we play the victim, and that's just not cool. No one wants to be around a victim. I promise you, they just don't. And so you have to face your triggers, you have to understand them, and you have to not step into that dysfunction yourself, because that's going to trigger and trigger and trigger. So again, in that instance, feeling controlled, buying into it and getting all sad and crazy about it and getting all dysfunctional about it, that's going to create a whole ripple effect of other crap you don't want to deal with, versus just being like, you know what, I don't really want to do that, so I'm going to say no, and I'm going to say I can't do that. And so that relieves that entire thing that you would have dealt with otherwise, and you can just keep it moving. So a verse in the Bible that kind of, I think, encapsulates this idea very, very nicely is Matthew 9:16 and 17, where it talks about the new wineskins. So basically, you're not going to put new wine, brand new wine, which is us, right? New wine into old wineskins, because those old wineskins have already expanded. They've already done their deal with the wine that was in it before, right? So you want to put new wine in new wineskins, because if you put new wine in old wineskins, then the old wineskins are going to break, and then the new wine will be spilled out, and both will be ruined. So it's like, do you really want to put what your brand new self back into an old method? Or do you, because it's going to spoil the newness. It's going to make you feel like you're not making progress. It's going to make you feel like you're taking one step forward and 30 steps back. It's going to make you feel like you have to, start all over again, or, maybe you're not worthy of this, or it's going to make you feel like you're not good enough, or you're inadequate, and maybe you're not smart enough to figure it out. Those are all lies from the enemy, but you have to be so cognizant of yourself, right? So it's like, Put your new wine, your new thoughts, your new behaviors, your new mindsets, your new attitudes into a new mechanism, into a new method, into a new wineskin. You have to do that so that both are preserved. The new wine and the new wineskin are preserved, because again, if you put new wine in an old wineskin, the old wineskin will burst and everything will be lost. You will not, it will all be spoiled. So you don't want to waste. Basically, you don't want to waste what the Lord is doing in your heart for it to just feel like it's for nothing, and it's not really for nothing, because, obviously God has a plan, but like, it's going to make us in our humanness feel like, why am I even trying? This is stupid. Like, being my old way was so much better. And the enemy eats that up. He loves to hear us give up. He loves to see us struggle and be like, I'm throwing in the towel, I'm giving up, this is too hard. That is where he gets a foothold. That is where he can bring us into dysfunction so quickly, because that is where we are comfortable and safe. We have to be the chain breaker in our own life to be able to get to that next level and bring ourselves out. So taming our triggers is a big way to do that, by just understanding, again, what bothers us, what triggers us, what emotions come up, what behaviors come up, what thoughts come up, and then how do we respond, or how do we react? And then do we want to respond or react in that way? And if we do, great. And if we don't, how should we change it? And then what can we do? And then the next time it happens, then we can practice it. We can also discuss it with people. We can talk about it with the people that we love and that are close to us in our lives, so that they can understand what we're going through, because sometimes our triggers might end up triggering them. Again, that fear dance. And so that it gives an opportunity for both people to talk about, yeah, you know what, actually, when you do that, when you respond like that to me, it makes me feel like this. And then I find myself in a trigger mode where then I'm responding in ways that make me feel bad. And so when you have that understanding and that vulnerability with each other, you can begin to grow in relationship. You can begin to create that deep foundation that you need in any kind of friendship, romantic relationship, work relationship, to be able to understand each other so that your communication is effective. That's what it's all about, effective communication. And so when you step into your identity, that means that you're you no matter what. No matter how someone acts, no matter what someone says, no matter what's going on around you, you should be steadfast in that identity no matter what. It shouldn't be shaken. Now, this is not going to be a perfect process either, right? Because you're becoming new. But these are all great opportunities to realize, like, what opportunities come up that really get me out of my identity? Like, really, really put me into a place I don't like. What kind of environment? What kind of situation? What kind of people? What kind of comments? What kind of attitudes? These are all so important. They're all indicators. This is all such important information for us to grab a hold of, really assess and think about, determine how it makes us feel, and just decide, like, does that like align with how we want to feel and what we want to think? And if it does, great. Keep it moving. And if it's not, figure something else out, because if you continue to do what you're always doing, you're always going to get what you got. And so you have to do something different in order to get something different, right? You have to do something new to get something new. And oftentimes that starts right here in our mind and right here in our hearts. And so if you are finding yourself being a you that you don't like no matter what, that's a whole other process that you need to invite the Lord into to help you out with. Because if you are in that mind space where you are finding yourself reacting or responding in ways that you just do not like, and when I'm saying responding, I'm thinking that it's premeditated, right? Like, you are thinking about this, you're being proactive. So if you're being proactive about, well, I'm going to tell this person XYZ, or I'm going to light them up, I'm going to tell them all about themselves, I'm going to point out every little thing, I'm going to critique them and let them know how small they are and how, I don't approve, and that is like predetermined. That is a response. So a response can be negative too. It doesn't always have to be a positive response. So if you find yourself in that kind of mindset, you need to really invite the Lord into that, especially if you're a believer in Jesus Christ, because he came and died for you so that you could find freedom in him and you could find salvation in him and you could live a free life knowing his love for you so that you can give it to other people. And so if you're not walking in that fully and completely as much as you possibly can, you need to invite the Lord into that. And if you don't know the Lord, if you don't know Jesus Christ as your personal Lord and Savior, consider getting to know him. He's amazing. A lot of people are turned off by what they think he's like because of how other people act, and they pin the sins of people onto God. We talked about that last week a little bit too. You just can't do that. You have to really know him for yourself. You have to explore that relationship with the Lord on your own, of course in community too, but you need to make that decision for yourself. Don't let a person from the church or a pastor from the church or somebody else who didn't represent him well, that they give you the idea of that's how God is, because God is wonderful. He is loving and he is kind and he is generous and he is merciful and gracious and he is just, but he is love. And so know him. It's worth your life to know him. There's nothing else worth in this life other than knowing him. So if you don't know him, I really encourage that you get to know him, because he's wonderful and he will change your life radically. So back to knowing who you are and stepping into that completely and fully. You have to decide if you like what you are stepping into as your identity. And if your identity is rooted and grounded in Jesus Christ, then that's going to be a transition that things are going to come up. He's going to have to dredge. He's going to have to bring things up. He's going to have to help you, renew your mind and heart. And so that's all part of the process. It's normal. Don't get freaked out if you start, coming up against a lot of hard stuff, or all of a sudden you think your life is great when you're living in sin, and then all of a sudden you get saved and then your life gets really, really hard. Well, that's because you're going through consecration. You're realizing that your sin is not good, and so certain things you did before you can't really do without being convicted anymore. And so there's a change for sure that happens. There's a price to pay on our end, and that's dying to ourselves, dying to our flesh, dying to our lust, dying to our fleshly desires, and surrendering our will to God's will, which sometimes can be painful. But you have to make sure that what you're doing is coming from a place of true identity in Jesus Christ, if you are a believer in God. And so no matter what, you should be who you are. Now, again, this is not going to be a perfect practice. I for sure get into my flesh. I for sure get irritated. I for sure act crass. I for sure act like a butthole sometimes, but at the end of the day, I do feel convicted about those things, and I do take them to the Lord, and I do ask for help, and I don't want the people in my life to suffer hardship, pain, distress, hurt, anything like that. Anything that's hurts their heart. I don't want to be a person who does that to people that I love. And so I want to make sure that, even if I have to distance myself in certain situations, or I have to, say no in certain situations, to make sure that I protect that, because it really is about me, right? Then I have to do that stuff for myself as well, for other people. And if I do end up hurting someone's feelings, I have to make sure that I'm apologizing and repenting for that, and asking for forgiveness, and really from a true heart of, I'm not wanting to do that to you, and I'm not just saying I'm sorry so that we can reconnect and get back on good terms again, and then just for me to do it again. But I'm coming from a place of realizing man, that was really wrong of me, and I'm sorry, and I don't want to do that to you. I don't want to hurt you that way. I see what I did, and I'm going to try really hard not to repeat that again in the future. Will you please forgive me? I think it's very, very important. And we have to go to God that way too, right? With a repentant heart. And that's part of that new wine in the new wineskin, that new level of awareness, where we're stepping into changing who we are, allowing God to change who we are, and walking that out with purpose and with intention. It's very, very important that we do that. And so that is how we cultivate an identity in Jesus. While we're doing that, he will change us and mold us and grow us and shape us and everything. He is the potter and we are the clay, right? And so again, I touched on this a little while ago. We have to remember too that, a lot of what people do really isn't about us. It's more about what's going on in their own heart. And so oftentimes it can be a projection that, is coming across that we take personally, or it's someone just living their life and doing what they're doing, and somehow we're reading into it, or we're making assumptions about what it actually means, or we're not taking someone's words at face value when we're reading into them, or we're seeing a shift in energy, we're making it into something different because maybe it's triggering us in a way of feeling like we're going to be left behind, or we're, something bad's going to happen and the other shoe's going to drop or whatever. So we're trying to prepare ourselves. These are all things that we have got to get over and overcome, because they will ruin every single relationship in your life if you don't overcome them and you don't tame them. Triggers will ruin relationship, whether it be friendship, interpersonal, romantic, professional, whatever. if you cannot manage your triggers and you cannot tame your triggers, they will sabotage relationship. They will ruin relationship. They will keep you stuck in dysfunction. They will keep you stuck in brokenness, and you will not see the types of relationships that you want in your life. And you're going to keep spinning around in this cycle of just dysfunction. I don't really even know what else to call it or how to really say it. It's what it is. It's just dysfunction. And so we have to step in to the understanding of who we are and change that, start to change that, right? Because we have to see people as individuals. We have to see people as autonomous individuals who have their own stuff going on, their own faculties, their own belief systems, their own insecurities, their own confidences, their own problems, their own concerns and worries and all these things. And our lives are complex. Like, there's some people who have many, many layers and other people who have many, many layers, but those layers look totally different. And so we have to be respectful that everyone is in their own process. Everyone's in their own experience. And so when someone is willing and able to like bring you into that experience, to share that experience with them, regardless of what the experience is, whether it's an experience or the experience of their life, we have to be so respectful of that, not only for them, but for ourselves as well. And know that like that iron and sharpening iron, right? That iron sharpening iron is going to bring things up in each other, because that's what relationships do. A good, healthy relationship will help you grow and become better. It'll help motivate you and encourage you and like help you see the possibilities that maybe you couldn't see on your own because you only have your own perspective. But when you bring a relationship together with another person, that person's going to bring their own experiences, their own perspectives, and they're not always going to align with yours. And that's okay. That's good. That's where that conflict sometimes comes into play, but conflict is healthy. Conflict is good. Conflict is normal. And if you grew up in a household like mine, or you grew up in a mindset like mine, like relationship wise, conflict always meant the end. It always was bad and scary. And so I avoided it like the plague in every like romantic relationship that I've ever been in, because I was so afraid to rock the boat, because I was afraid that like, well, conflict happens, oh, that means it's over. But now, again, I'm older, I have more maturity, I have more insight and wisdom and knowledge. Conflict is necessary. If you are just agreeing with every single thing all the time, I mean, if it's naturally and you're agreeing, great, that's awesome, bravo, killer, great, do it. But don't agree when it's not agreeable to you. Don't, because you're breaking your own boundary, you're self-abandoning, right? That's a trigger. You're actually responding to a trigger. And so if you are so afraid of conflict that you're not willing to stand up for yourself or have a differing opinion because you're afraid that if, this person doesn't like what I say, that they're going to leave, that's a trigger that you need to deal with. You got to figure that, that comes from somewhere. But conflict in any relationship, it helps the person grow. And it depends. If it's healthy conflict, that you can talk things through and disagree and have a discussion respectfully and be like, okay, cool, great. That's how you see it. This is how I see it. Awesome. And sometimes maybe it will be a deal breaker, but usually it's probably not gonna be, right? And so you have to know that conflict is healthy and it's normal and it's natural and it's necessary. Like you have to have that. There was someone that I heard recently online. It was like in relationship, and again, relationship in general, any relationship. If relationship has two people who are just constantly in agreement about everything, then like one person is effectively unnecessary. So it's good that people bring different ideas and perspectives to the table. It's good that you bring different experiences to the table. It's good that you bring a different mindset to the table, because in a relationship, you help each other grow. You help each other become stronger and better and smarter and faster and more effective and more efficient if it's a healthy relationship. So this is something so key to remember, that again, that might be new wine. That understanding, that mindset might be new wine. Don't put it back in the old wineskin. It's not going to last. It's going to burst, because that old wineskin can't contain it. You have to step fully into the understanding of this new wine, new wineskin, where it comes through in every way in your life, every single situation, because then you're standing in your true identity, and that doesn't change, and it's steadfast and it doesn't shift. But you can only be in that mindset of new identity and stepping into that faithfulness within yourself because of what the Lord's done for you, and walking out and practicing that new wine by placing it in a new wineskin, by understanding who you are and really how you function. And then being open to other people functioning how they function also. And when things come up that aren't like really vibing with you, having the courage to just have a conversation about it. Or to just put a boundary down for yourself and just say, like, that person's that person, and that person's going to do what that person's going to do. And I love that person, but you know what? I need to have a boundary for myself because that person's going to do what that person's going to do. And I want relationship with that person, but I need to make sure that I have stronger boundaries so that that relationship can actually be healthy. So when people are doing things, remember, it's mostly about themselves. You included, friend, me included. If something happens and I'm feeling a certain way, the best thing to do is to pause and to come back to self. And to explore, not focusing on the other person, not focusing on the situation, not focusing on all the circumstances involved to justify what you're feeling. Because if you look for whatever you're looking for, you're going to find it, good, bad, and different. You come back to self and you say, what am I feeling right now? And you identify that feeling. And if you can't identify the feeling, you need to sit with yourself until you figure it out. Because if your vocabulary doesn't extend past mad, sad, glad, you need to have a little bit more time with yourself. You need to be able to figure out, are you feeling frustrated? Are you feeling annoyed? Are you feeling irritated? Are you feeling disrespected? Are you feeling discarded? Are you feeling unimportant? Are you feeling invalid? Are you feeling, a myriad of different things? There are so many different emotions that we can feel. And then you can start walking that back to say, all right, well, where does that come from really? Where did I experience that before? Like what happened to have in my past where I felt this way? And what am I attaching this to right now? Is that true? Is that really happening right now? Or is this my own mind or my own heart feeling a certain way where I'm trying to find control or connectivity or acceptance? And oftentimes those things come back to ourselves too. If we don't accept ourselves, then we're never going to believe other people accept us. We're always going to be looking around the corner for like someone to reject us and not fully be on our side or fully be for us because we aren't fully for ourselves or fully for us. So it's going to be very difficult for you to trust that someone else could be. If you are not able to trust yourself, then it's going to be extremely hard for you to ever trust anybody else because you are projecting your own experience on that person. So if you can't trust you, then you can't trust them because, well, if you know what you do, then you're going to project that onto that other person and expect them to be the same. And that's why you can't trust them. You have to be so aware of yourself and in touch with your own heart so that you can stop blame shifting and you can stop putting your emotions and the responsibility of your emotions on other people. That you have to take it back into your own heart and you have to determine, you have to assess for yourself what's going on with you. Because remember, things that we do are often not about other people. It's about us. Things that other people do are often not about us. It's about them. So that self-reflection, that self-inspection needs to happen when you're feeling triggered. And even if you need to take a beat, let's say you're in a conversation with someone or something happens or maybe it's a text message or an email or something like that. You do not have to respond immediately. If you're having a dialogue conversation with someone, you can just say, hey, listen, I need to take a breather for a few minutes. I need to go and kind of be by myself and think about this. I don't want to be disrespectful, but I need to take a minute for myself. Give me 15 minutes and I'll come back and we can discuss this. Is that okay? If it's a text message and you're like, oh, what the heck? Blah, 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 blah. Let your fingers and thumbs chill for a second, homegirl. You don't need to respond. You can just wait a minute. Get into your heart, into your mind. Think about what you're thinking and feeling. Pray about it if you need to. And sit with yourself for a minute before you just type out some crazy response. Touch with your heart and touch with your mind. then you can determine, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling this way? Do I need to respond in a certain way, or do I just need to put down a boundary for myself? I mean, and it could really be, I mean, they kind of can go together too. The boundary could be, your response, but it just depends on the situation. There could literally be a bazillion things that we could be talking about right now, right? So I'm trying to be as general as possible, but at the end of the day, you can take your time. If you get an email at work and you are frazzled, you are overwhelmed, you are stressed out, and you're like, again, maybe you're feeling out of control. Maybe you're like, oh my gosh, I can't, the schedule, and then you get this email and you just want to respond back really, really quick. And maybe it's a biting tone. Maybe it's a snarky response. Maybe it's something really crappy. That's your way of getting back control. You just have to be aware of it. You have to realize you're doing it. And instead of doing that, be like, you know what? I'm feeling very overwhelmed right now. I'm feeling very stressed out. Maybe the best thing I can do is to take a 5-minute break, get up from my desk, go outside, walk around, and think about this. And then I can come back and I can respond from an open heart of kindness and of like either speaking truth in love or putting a boundary, but at least responding in a way out of respect for that person and for yourself. Because when you are reactive and you're coming from a place of dysfunction, you are not respecting yourself, and you are definitely not respecting the other person. I can guarantee you that 100%. You got to really be so mindful of that. And again, we're not going to be perfect at it. I mess this up all the time, but when I'm really trying to be more intentional about things, I can tell a difference for sure. So it's very important that you just kind of stay on top of your own game and don't let your emotions get the best of you. You can't be emotionally led. That's just not a good way to live your life. Even when you're like good emotions, like being super excited, like that can lead down some dark roads too, because you're not using your brain and you can get overly excited about something and make some really bad decisions. So there's not a good emotion versus a bad emotion, right? Sometimes anger is good. Sometimes anger isn't great, but we call it good and bad, but like really it's just an emotion. It's just an indicator of what's going on inside of you. So just remember that triggers are wounds that have not yet been healed, and that's in your heart and your mind that need to be healed. So invite the Lord into that. Ask the Lord to come and heal you, to show you, to help you, to really let him show you yourself, but be open, be prepared, because you might see some things that you are like, gross. That is disgusting. I don't like that in myself. But again, they're just indicators. Triggers are indicators. And instead of judging it and being like, oh, I'm so terrible and that's awful and I can't believe that, I'm so blah, 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 XYZ, whatever, don't judge it. Just learn from it. Pay attention to it. Let the indicators teach you what is going on, so that you can then go back up to the very beginning of what we said of saying, oh, well, this must be a trigger. Okay, well, how do I feel about this right now? How am I reacting? Do I like how I'm reacting? Oh, maybe I don't like how I'm reacting. Okay, well, could I act in a different way? Maybe I could do something else instead. Maybe I could act like this instead. Yeah, that might be better. And then maybe I'll feel less bad about myself because I'm not judging myself or feeling like I'm kind of, getting into a place of being unhealthy in my heart and my mind. I'm going to try this instead. And it also brings back that sense of peace and that self-control within your own person when you're able to kind of take yourself through these steps instead of just being reactionary and just having to go back later and having to apologize. But you can't take back words. You can't take back the things that are biting or that are harsh. And, people will remember those things and it will affect their hearts. And if you do it more and more and more and over and over and over, but yet you keep apologizing for it, then you're going to lose trust with people. They're not going to trust you, and they're going to want to like move away from you, and they're not going to want to have communication with you. They're not going to want to be in community with you. They're not going to want to spend time with you. They're not going to want to share things with you. They're not going to want to involve you in personal things in their life because they're not going to be able to trust you. So it's very, very important that we think about how what we do, it might not be about someone else, but it definitely affects someone else. Just like how other people, it might not be about us, but when they're in their dysfunction, it definitely can affect us. And so there's a big difference there, but they're equally as important to consider in relationship, because it ends up affecting and hurting both people, them personally for feeling bad about it, but then also people that they care about by lashing out and being reactionary, instead of taking a pause and thinking about it and managing that trigger for themselves. And so instead of judging it, just get curious. Get curious. What can I do about it? How do I feel about it? What is going on with me? Why am I doing this? What's coming up for me? Where does this come from? Get curious about it. Start asking questions. Take a breather. Ask questions. Get curious and give it time. Don't expect it to be figured out today or in an hour or whatever. Give it time. This is why it's important to invite the people in your life into your process so that they can understand it. They can feel vulnerable, to have permission to also share what their process is, so you can do it together. You can work it out together in community and in relationship and in a safe space where it's done out of respect and out of compassion and care and understanding for one another. And honestly too, for like a desire to see each other grow and to become and to like flourish. You know what I'm saying? It's a beautiful thing. It really can be a beautiful thing if you choose for it to be, or it can just continue to ruin all your relationships. It's really up to you. So think about this. We're going to end here. The best really is yet to come. But it's only available and it can only be seen and you can only touch it and you can only experience it if you're willing to tame your triggers so that you can invite and receive all the good things that God has for you instead of pushing them away and being a saboteur. So I hope this blessed you. I hope there are some key takeaways that you can take from this episode and apply to your own life. And I hope that some of the triggers, maybe you were triggered during this episode, maybe feeling defensive or maybe trying to say, I don't do that. Or again, just take it as an indicator, take it as an opportunity to explore, to ask questions, to get curious. And until next time, you guys, be blessed.